Having dealt with the ultrastructure of chloroplast at great lengths and understanding what is located where, next we are going to move to the photosynthetic pigments. By now you have an idea where these photosynthetic pigments are located and what are these photosynthetic pigments. Just a formal lesson for understanding the photosynthetic pigments, as we had said that we are going to discuss them. We have two types of photosynthetic pigments which are playing an important role in trapping of energy. We know that the pigment whichever is responsible for photosynthesis, basically it traps the sunlight in a good mechanism, I would say, in a specified mechanism, and then transfer it into the chemical reaction whichsoever is taking place and ultimately give rise to glucose. So we have photosynthetic pigments, and these photosynthetic pigments are chlorophylls and carotenoids. Now we have to talk one by one about these pigments. First thing that you have to keep in mind is that the primary photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll. Okay, which chlorophyll, that we are going to discuss. So we have primary photosynthetic pigment, one thing, and the remaining ones are known as accessory pigments, those which help the primary photosynthetic pigment by broadening the spectrum of white light that can be absorbed. Okay, see, the primary photosynthetic pigment is going to work within a certain framework of the spectrum, and these accessory pigments would be going beyond that spectrum, and whatever energy they are taking up, they would pass on to this primary photosynthetic pigment, which would convert the energy henceforth. So there are two types of pigments, the primary photosynthetic pigment and the accessory pigments. Now these pigments would help this only for taking up the energy and broaden the spectrum of white light from where the energy is absorbed. This primary photosynthetic pigment, as you have studied in your younger classes, you did not used to write carotenoids, carotenes or xanthophylls. All you wrote in the photosynthetic equation was chlorophylls. Alright, in the beginning also we just wrote chlorophyll. So it is this chlorophyll that is the primary photosynthetic pigment. But over here we have written chlorophylls. That means there would be many types of chlorophylls. Now in the green plants we have 5 different types of chlorophylls. Okay, so if I represent this primary photosynthetic pigment as CHL, the short form for chlorophyll, there are 5 different types. We name them as A, B, C, D and E. Alphabetic order. 5 types of chlorophylls are there. CHLA, CHLB, CHLC, CHLD, CHLE. We have different types of chlorophylls, and when I say that I am to consider primary photosynthetic pigment, then I would say chlorophyll A. Alright, that is the primary photosynthetic pigment. Now all the green plants, they have these pigments. Okay, all the green plants, I am talking about any green plant which would be present in water, it could be present in shady atmosphere, but the maximum of green plants, the green leaves, they have these 2 pigments, okay, A and B. Now this is primary photosynthetic pigment. As much as 35% of the chlorophyll is chlorophyll B. So the remaining is chlorophyll A. Remember this as well. This chlorophyll B is also important because it is responsible for taking up the accessory energy and act as accessory pigment. Along with chlorophyll B, there are other accessory pigments as well, the carotenoids, which have further classification as carotenes, and xanthophylls. Now you have to remember that these pigments are responsible for giving color except for the green color. Okay, now these pigments, why they are giving green color to the plant? Because that is the region in which they do not absorb any light. That is, the green part is not absorbed by the plant, so it just dissipates that green part and it looks greener in color. Talking about the carotenoids, they have yellowish and reddish appearance, and that is because they give out reddish color, and you can associate this chlorophyll thing that it is very much responsible for photosynthesis, and shady plants, they perform lesser those which grow in shade, they have lesser photosynthesis taking place because over there the energy given out is green and green is least taken. That is part of spectrum. You just can associate that concept over here if you can, for better understanding or remembering purpose. If you don't want to, you can just skip and learn that in chlorophylls we have two chlorophylls which are of prime importance. Out of those two, one is the primary photosynthetic pigment that has to do all the energy considerations, keeping in mind the work that has been assigned to it, that is of photosynthesis. The remaining pigments, whatever we are discussing, apart from chlorophyll A, they would be taking up the sunlight that falls in PAR, photosynthetic active radiation, and they would take up that energy and pass it on to chlorophyll A molecule itself. In further cases, we are going to study that how those molecules are arranged, and you can recall the term phycobialisomes and phycobilins. This is what we have to confine our understanding to in this lesson, that the photosynthetic pigments are present and they are responsible for taking up the solar energy that comes in the form of photons, and chlorophyll A plays the most important role. Now, when it plays the most important role, let's have a look at its structure. If you can recall the mineral nutrition chapter that done in the previous class, you would have noticed over there that magnesium is responsible for the formation of chlorophyll. Whenever there is a deficiency of magnesium, I'm just repeating it, if you can recall, whenever there is a deficiency of magnesium, there is chlorosis. What was chlorosis? It is the yellowing of leaves that takes place. Now, magnesium is going to be required in chlorophyll. So, this is the, we are writing its chemical formula. So, we have put magnesium in the beginning. We have also talked about that if nitrogen is not present, then also leaves undergo chlorosis. So, I am going to put another thing over here, NMG. We have certain amount of nitrogen, we have certain amount of magnesium, and of course, chlorophyll has CHO. So, this is what a chlorophyll representation would be. Whether it is A or B, we have this part that is to be present in chlorophyll. Magnesium, nitrogen, CHO. Okay. Now, we have 55 molecules of 55 atoms of carbon. Then we have 70 70 atoms. Oxygen is 5 and nitrogen is 4. This is what is the formula of chlorophyll A. Alright, this is the formula of chlorophyll A. Now, in terms of chlorophyll B, same thing would be there, magnesium would be there, because chlorophyll A or B, both of them are having green color, and in deficiency of magnesium, there will not be any green coloration because chlorophyll will be absent. Similar thing. This time, only difference that would be present is that instead of 5 oxygens, it is having 6 oxygens. Rest everything is similar. So, this is chlorophyll B. Okay, is it clear now? That it would be clear, of course, but the point is that it is little bit difficult to remember. So, I hope the way we started with it, that way you can remember it. It is easy, and only difference is 6. Okay, 55, 75, 4. That we have, you have to remember. Now, this part, this chlorophyll A is bluish green in color, and chlorophyll B is olive green. This thing also is to be remembered. Now, as you can see, there is not much difference. There is difference of one particular oxygen that is there. Now, the structure of both chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B would almost be similar, where you have to keep in mind that chlorophyll A has a tadpole-like structure. Tadpole has a head and a long tail, something like this. Tadpole-like structure. You don't have to get into details of the structure. What is the structure? Not tadpole, tadpole. Tadpole-like structure. It has a porphyrin ring. See, I am not going to get into details of chemistry over here. Least you can do in this thing is that remember it by heart. porphyrin ring and an alcoholic phytol tail. A porphyrin ring would be there and phytol tail. In the porphyrin ring, there would be 4 pyrols that are joined to each other by methine bonds. Now this is all talking about CH, CH, CH. This is what CH and of course O over here. What about magnesium? Magnesium forms the center of the ring. Please remember it. Magnesium forms the center of the ring where 4 pyrols are joined by methine bonds across each other, and there is a long phytol alcoholic tail. Now this is what the structure is like this. Over here we are going to have 4 pyrols. In the center we are going to find magnesium. This tail would be long alcoholic phytol tail. Okay. Now what is the difference between chlorophyll B? In the case of chlorophyll B, the third carbon, that is C3 carbon, third carbon of the pyrrole ring, will have CHO instead of CH3. So this is the difference. That is why we have an extra O. So this third carbon has CHO, and that is responsible for taking up the different wavelength of light. This all is to be remembered. Okay. If you cannot associate with your knowledge of chemistry, if you're weak in chemistry probably, if you're good, that's excellent. If you're not, then also there is no problem. You don't have to get into depth of the chemistry in it. You just have to remember that because we talked about that the structure is a tadpole like structure, it would have a head and it would have a tail. The tail is made up of phytol alcohol. Okay, all for alcohol. Which alcohol? Phytol. And the ring head is made up of 4 pyrrole rings which are joined together by central magnesium. This you have to remember. Moving further, we have carotenoids. Now in terms of carotenoids, as it was in the case of chlorophyll, CHONMG, in this case you are simply going to remember C and H. I hope this is not blurred, you can clearly see it. How many C? 40 C. How many H? 56 H. This is to be remembered. Okay, we are talking about carotenes over here. You know, this is the example of beta carotene. Now, why I am talking about this beta carotene, why it is so important? This beta carotene, when the 2 molecules of water come and join with it, it becomes vitamin A, which is responsible for good eyesight. We often say that carrot is good for eyes. Why? Because it contains beta carotene. Now that beta carotene is a photosynthetic pigment that is having this particular structure. Okay, and in terms of xanthophyll, when this particular carotene, these carotenes, they get oxidized, they form xanthophylls. Now simply C40H56, same carotene, add 1 O. And C40H56, add another O. It becomes O2. These are 2 types of xanthophylls which are again responsible for providing color to the plants. Now this is cryptoxanthin. Remember this name, okay? And this is lutein that you often find when the green chilies, they become red. That is lutein. Now green chilies, they become red after some time, you know that thing. Now this particular aspect should be kept in mind, that when the carotenes or when this particular pigment is taking too much energy, alright, or the electrons are being released, this particular compound, these carotenes, they take up the electrons, okay, and join oxygen to them, so that whatever energy is being released in the photolysis of water during photosynthesis is accommodated within the leaf. I hope I am clear that these carotenes, as you can see, it has taken up oxygen. It has taken up oxygen in this form, and this particular taking up of oxygen helps the plant in a way that when the green leaves are doing the photosynthesis, there is lot of photon intake and there is photolysis of water. So at that stage, there is a chance of oxidation, taking up of electrons. So that is counteracted by xanthophylls. They take up those electrons and they form the xanthophylls. They add up oxygen to them, and in that way they prevent the leaf from the excessive intake of energy, uptake of energy. So we see that we had two types of pigments. One was primary photosynthetic pigment, that was chlorophyll A, we talked about its structure. Then we have the accessory pigments which help the primary photosynthetic pigment to take up the energy and broaden the spectrum, ultimately to perform the photosynthesis, of course. And what these accessory pigments were: the primary photosynthetic pigment happens to be green, because green is reflected, rest other colors are taken up, and we know that bluish part has the maximum energy. So they make maximum use of sunlight, and the accessory pigments are a little bit deviated from the green color. They could be reddish or yellowish in their appearance, and whatever they do, their purpose is basically providing the primary photosynthetic pigment or the main pigment, that is chlorophyll A, with the excessive energy. Now, another thing you have to remember, that in chlorophyll A there are reaction centers. Now at this stage the pen has stopped. We'll talk about reaction centers in the next video. Let's pile up this particular photosynthetic pigment topic right here.